The Deep South's oldest rivalry just a day away. Everyone has written off the Auburn Tigers. Is that fair? We talk about it on today's Locked On Auburn.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Happy Ferg Friday to all who celebrate. We're celebrating today with Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer. Depending on where you look, Jay Ferg, a 4-touchdown underdog. The Auburn Tigers are going into the Deep South's oldest rivalry in Athens tomorrow. Is that too much? I feel like it is.
I feel like it is, and it's not a whole lot to do with what Auburn is, but I think right now it's a little bit more with what Georgia is.
Well said.
Georgia messed around with Kent State, had to come back to beat Missouri last week on the road. This Georgia team's not really clicking on all cylinders right now, especially on the offensive side of the football. And for Auburn, the thing is like 28, 29-point spread, that's usually reserved for a team that's like really bad or is giving up. I don't think Auburn's either of those. I think Auburn's not playing well, and I think they're well below what is expected of an Auburn team right now. We all can see that. We all say that. This team hasn't packed it up and folded yet. Yeah, and I think Brandon Council's comments earlier in the week are kind of a little bit of an indication of that. But
you okay with him? And for those who missed it, he said that the Auburn offensive line has a chance to demolish the Georgia defensive line. And I mean, that's kind of paraphrasing it, but you okay with him saying it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't care if a guy says that or not. I'm interested to hear what his coaches have to say about that. But, it's, hey, have confidence, go in there and project that and deal with the consequences if it fires Georgia up. It's one of those things there. But, I don't think this team's kind of packed it in. And we haven't seen Georgia kind of really clicking since really the Oregon game. And they look so good in week one. And maybe they can get back to that level. But, Auburn's in a position where, they have a chance to potentially make a game of it, doing some of the same stuff that Kent State and Missouri were able to do. And I think the other thing is that Auburn's defense the last 2 weeks has stepped up and I thought played pretty good football, winning football each of these last 2 weeks. You do that against a Georgia offense that's not, clicking right now. Maybe you have a chance to hang around in this game and make it a lot more competitive than people think they are.
Yeah. I think that's what's going to go. I think that's what's going to happen. Wow, words. Circling back to the Brandon Council comments and, Georgia using it for bulletin board material and all that. I went on Doug Amos's TV show up in Montgomery yesterday morning, The Score, and he asked me, what I thought about it. And I'm like, this isn't a game where you need bulletin board material. This is Auburn, Georgia. I mean, right. All of these folks, a big chunk of Auburn's team is from Georgia. They want nothing more to be the first Auburn team since 2005 to go into Athens and win. And Georgia's aware of that. Bulletin board material, that's not a thing. And when Auburn plays Georgia and when Auburn plays Alabama and when Auburn plays LSU, to me, it doesn't matter. So if it's something that Council can do to be a leader and to, maybe fire up the rest of the offensive line or the rest of the offense, to me, I love it. I love that they're still trying to show that they are aggressive. And also, Ferg, I mean, we can all say a bunch of different things about Bryan Harsin, right? And a lot of people are. But one thing is he has these kids believing that they can beat anybody, despite what's happened so far this year. This team believes they can go into Athens and beat Georgia. And you couldn't say that for a lot of the Auburn teams of the last decade.
Yeah, this Auburn team, there's a lot of belief in there. I think it goes back to something that I said at the beginning of the season where it's like, if you're still playing football for Auburn University right now, you're a true believer. You had an opportunity. You had plenty of opportunities and maybe plenty of reasons to go play somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And a lot of guys took that opportunity and went somewhere else and are playing somewhere else. Some of them are doing really well right now with that. But if you're still hanging around here, you believe in what's going on here or you just have this really undying loyalty to Auburn, and like either one of those scenarios, whatever area you fall in on the spectrum on that, that's a good thing, and this team, we'll see what happens moving forward. We'll see what happens, with Bryan Harsin's future and how Auburn plays these next few games and all that, and what happens from here to the end of the season. I don't know. I don't think we're going to see a 2012. I don't think we're going to see that from them. I don't know if Auburn's going to be necessarily that much better in the record book than that 2012 team. But I will say this: packing it in, giving up. I don't.
That's not who these kids are.
Yeah, I don't get that vibe from these guys. I just don't. And things can change and all that, but like I don't get that vibe from the people on this team and especially the leadership on this team.
Yeah, I just can't see a locker room that has John Samuel Shanker, Derek Hall, Brandon Council, Owen Papo in it, folding. I just don't see that. And I think there are more wins on this schedule, regardless of what happens and when Auburn decides to make a change and all of that. I think your home games are winnable. I think Arkansas is not as good as people act like they are. I think Texas A&M is in fact bad. I think that's extremely winnable at home,
especially on offense.
100%. And so that's going to be a low scoring game that I think Auburn can kind of put itself in a situation to win in the fourth quarter at home. And then, Western Kentucky's there. So I'm not saying this is a surefire 6-6 team by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think they're done winning football games.
Yeah, and it could go south on them, and we will see if and when Auburn's administration feels like they have to make a decision on Bryan Harsin, and whether that's this weekend or 2 weekends from now or, the end of the season, there's a wide range of things. But yeah, this team is, you saw it with LSU last week. I think LSU's still a team that's got to figure a lot of stuff out and it's got some issues, but yeah, this team is not going to fold or pack it in. This team, though, is very flawed, right? I don't think they're a bad football team, in terms of the talent. I don't think they are a team that's going to give up, but I do think they've got some real deep-seated issues that they've got to correct and they got to fix. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to do those things, especially at this point in the season. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be a team necessarily that, like in 2012, they just get the doors blown off of them, week in and week out. After, about the midway point of that 2012 season, you knew it was done. It was done. And I haven't seen that or felt that from this team. I don't know if I'm going to. Yeah. All
right. What can the Auburn Tigers do from a scheme standpoint? And also, we answer some of your listener questions, including, can Auburn fire Harsin if they beat Georgia tomorrow? And we also get Justin's thoughts on the Auburn basketball season coming up as practices are up and rolling. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. If you have not downloaded this app, it is an extremely fun way to watch some games that you may not have a whole lot of interest in. I love it for baseball purposes and with MLB heating up, outside of the Braves, I don't really care about a lot of the action going on, but it's so fun with Underdog Fantasy. You can either do, I call them slips, where you can it's a stat prediction or projection. You can choose if it's higher or lower, and you can stack those up on top of each other, went up to 20 times whatever you're putting down, which is very, very cool. But I love the daily fantasy drafts, and you can do it for, if there's just one game, you can do it for Monday Night Football. Of course, you can do it for the full slate on Sunday. There's so many fun ways to play daily fantasy when you download Underdog Fantasy. The app is free. You can go to underdogfantasy.com. And when you sign up, use the promo code LOCKEDON, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Go to underdogfantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store. Once again, promo code LOCKEDON. Ferg, before we jump into some of these listener questions that are in the Locked On Auburn Discord, how can people sign up for the Observer? I think you're muted, buddy.
Wow. Wonderful. I only do podcasts for a living. AuburnObserver.com. It's only $6 a month or $60 a year. Wow. I feel really stupid.
I couldn't form a sentence earlier, so it's fine.
Sign up there. You get emails of every time we post a newsletter or post a podcast. We had a really fun podcast this week previewing Auburn, Georgia with our friends Ben Wolk and Jordan Hill.
Cool.
Did a story, a breakdown on the middle eight, and boy, that was real depressing for Auburn fans to read. I
felt
bet.
so sad after reading that.
Yeah, that one was tough. Did some Auburn basketball. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. Did a story on Janai Broom. There's a lot of stuff. And then over the weekend, we'll have coverage from Auburn, Georgia, post-game podcast, and then whatever may come up over the next few days. AuburnObserver.com. Check it out. And like I said, everything we do gets sent to your email inbox so you can read and listen on your own time. It's the easiest way to keep up with what we've got going on.
That's right. AuburnObserver.com. All right. You mentioned some of the deep-seated issues with this, and we had a question from the Locked On Auburn Discord, and I can't find it right now. But what are some of these issues, right? I mean, what are some of these issues? I assume you believe most of it is on offense, and I'd love for you to kind of go into that just a little bit. How can this team fix some of this stuff?
Well, I felt like Auburn last week on the offensive line played a little better. I think having Brandon Council at center and I thought the guards played better. I thought you didn't have as many pass protection issues, not as many breakdowns with communication. But the fact of the matter is, you go to Football Outsiders, you look at their offensive line stats that they updated this week. Auburn is in the bottom 10 of the country in stuff rate and sack rate. Sack rate is the easy one. You can tell how many times the team drops back to pass and gets sacked. Stuff rate is how many times does your running game, your handoffs to your running backs get tackled at or before the line of scrimmage? Auburn's in the bottom 10. The only two Power 5 teams that are worse than them in both categories are Stanford, who I believe is 1-3, and Boston College, which is 2-2 and has looked pretty rough this season, or 2-3 or something like that. This offensive line is what it is. I mean, we've been saying this for years now. This was going to come home at some point. Lack of recruiting, lack of development there. The guys who are in there, are playing hard. They're trying their best. They've had injuries. They've had to deal with all these things. It's just Auburn's offensive line. This is just a years-long issue that's really come home for them. And because of that, they have a hard time keeping a young quarterback protected. They're having a hard time establishing any sort of running game, which can give you some consistency on offense. That's the big one. Additionally, and this goes for both sides of the ball, Auburn is getting blasted in the middle eight under Bryan Harsin. 87-13 is the spread. The point difference
for folks who don't know what the middle eight is. It's the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. Yeah,
Bill Belichick was kind of the guy who made this famous in coaching. Whereas it's a game within a game, and it's because of the kickoff at to start the second half. Teams that manipulate the middle eight the best usually are ones that win. 72% of the teams that win the middle eight in Power 5 football go on to win their games. Auburn routinely gets beaten, and this season poorly in the middle eight. And so that's a combination of focus, time management, coaching strategy. And this also goes into the defense.
Auburn's the E word, Ferg. You got to say Harsin's E word. You got to say execution. There we go.
Execution. And this also, we can talk about how the offense has a hard time doing it. But the defense, you got to keep in mind with the defense, Auburn's defense has allowed a touchdown in the final 2 minutes of the first half in every single game they've played this season.
Oh, wow.
Every single one of them. Auburn has only scored once coming out of the locker room in the second half. They're 42-7 in the middle eight. And again, if it's the game within a game, you can overcome that, but it's hard to overcome that routinely. And so, that's an everything thing. When it's time management. It's guys, is the defense getting fatigued? What's happening with the execution on offense? The fact that you can't be consistent, you not finishing drives against LSU. Auburn, scores on their first three scoring trips, their first three scoring chances, and then doesn't score in the next four. Yeah, it's a lot of that stuff. So, how can it get better? It can get better because, I think a lot, especially on offense last week against LSU, a lot of it was self-inflicted.
Right.
Staying behind the chains, turning the ball over, doing that kind of stuff. But then also, there's some of it. It's just this defense doesn't have a ton of depth, and I think they get worn down at the end of the first half. And then also just the offensive line, when you don't have consistent offensive line play, it's hard for you to do anything consistently on the offensive side of the football. And that's really, really come home. And the teams are only getting tougher from here. You're going on the road. You're playing the defending national champions this week. Ole Miss is undefeated. You play them next week. This is stuff. It only gets tougher. It only gets tougher from here. And Auburn has established a pattern, especially since Bo Nix has gone down of not being a team that does much on offense in the second half.
All right, so let's turn to the Locked On Auburn Discord. If you want to join this, the link is in the episode description down below. Or if you're listening on audio, it's in the show description. It's free. C&D asks, what is the best possible, worst possible, and most realistic outcome for Auburn football this season? I think we would both agree that the worst case is they lose out. Right? Yep. That's the worst case. You somehow 100%. Lose to Western Kentucky at home. Best case, that to me is
make a ball game.
Yeah. And so your other wins for that would be what? Arkansas, you win your home games.
Maybe you win your home games. Maybe you can beat State on the road. I'm not super impressed with Mississippi State, but
oh really? I'm super high on them.
So. It's Mississippi State, and it's like Auburn's going to have more talent than them, but it's State. Throws the ball exceptionally well. They are coming off.
You do weird things in Starkville, though, man.
That's a good point. Yeah, but you lump that in there. You lump that in there with that. So like, beat Western Kentucky, get 2 more SEC wins. Maybe that's your best case scenario. Your most realistic scenario, I think, is this is a team that may get 1 or 2 more scalps, so that's it. It's only getting tougher from here. You talk about these home games. Arkansas is a team that has a lot of its ducks in a row. Texas A&M's got an insanely good defense and an insanely bad offense at the moment. But like that, they're going to make life really difficult on Auburn when they have the ball in their hands. So this is. I think you're most likely seeing this team probably finish with a losing record, and I think your best case scenario though is that they scrape around and get to a bowl game, and I'm not going to rule that out. It's just going to be really, really tough based on what we've seen the last 5 weeks.
Right. Wonder Beer asks, how many points does Auburn need to score in the first half to beat Georgia? And I think it needs to be like in the mid to upper 20s. And you just hope that the defense has an outstanding day in Athens.
Yeah, maybe in the 20s. We've seen that the teens doesn't really save you.
Not quite enough. Yeah. Not quite enough.
Yeah, in the 20s, I would agree with that. It's gonna be really tough to do that though. Georgia's defense is pretty nasty. I know they don't have Jalen Carter for this game, but this is where I disagree with Brandon Council's take on not trusting the guys behind them. They're all really good, and they recruit super well, and they rotate them in on the defensive front. Yeah, it'll be really, really tough to get to that, but maybe you can make some wild things happen.
Yeah. All right. Yak Games asks, with a win against Georgia, would it be logical to fire Bryan Harsin? And I'm going to expand on this just for a second. I think it is a super interesting conversation, and I did on the radio earlier this week.
Wow, yeah.
Where it's like, what if? And I was super dramatic and said both. What if he wins in Georgia and Ole Miss, which I don't think is realistic. But what if he wins one of them, right? Because the rumor is it's going to happen after the Ole Miss game, before the bye week and all that. And it's like, can you fire a dude who just recorded a top 10 road victory?
Top 5. Number 2 team in the country.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying like Georgia or Ole Miss, Ole Miss next week will probably be what, 8-ish? Like, I mean, they're going to be a top 10 team.
Yeah. I think if they beat Georgia, I think you're in a situation where you're going in and saying, okay, well, maybe this team isn't dead in the water, right? Like that's a lot changes if you go and beat a team like that. It doesn't completely change your status in life, but it affects it a lot. It definitely would affect it a lot. Yeah, if they beat Georgia, it's like I think you're now coming into more of like, okay, we'll review if we're going to keep Bryan Harsin around at the end of the season more than like in season, right? Like I think that changes.
How would Auburn fans react to this? Because so many Auburn fans are just so done with them. They would feel so weird because it's like, oh no, more Bryan Harsin, but also like, but we beat Georgia on the road. Yeah. Like
something the last 2 coaches weren't able to do at all.
Yeah. It would be a really weird. That'd be a really weird dynamic throughout the Auburn fan base if that were to happen.
It's so weird. And again, I don't think Auburn wins or
sure.
And I think
it's worth talking about.
I think it's going to be pretty lopsided on Saturday. but it's so weird that I have to sit here and think like, you can't rule it out. It's Auburn. Like, you can't completely rule it out. I've seen weird stuff here. But yeah, that would be. I mean, I thought it was weird when you come off the Missouri game and it's like that's a loss that you didn't lose, right? Like that was such a bad game that you didn't actually lose, and so now you're at a point where it's like, okay, well, that would be so weird. That'd be so weird.
It would be. But also would be like so Auburn at the same time.
Yeah, it would be crazy good Auburn, and we haven't seen a lot of that recently. But
it exists, though.
It definitely exists.
Yeah. All right. Last question, and then we'll get into some basketball. Mr. Mischief asks, who wins in a fight, a gorilla or a grizzly bear?
Grizzly bear.
I think so too.
Grizzly bear. The grizzly bears are
a weight thing, right?
Huh?
It's a weight thing.
It's a weight thing, and also you got to keep in mind, grizzly bears basically have knives on their hands. Gorillas have, fingers, and they can do a lot of
super strong.
Yeah, but like, if think about it this way, if you got in a fight and there were two people of, let's just say, relatively the same size, but one of them has, 10 knives sticking out of them when they swing, I think you're going to go with that one. I think you're going to pick that one. If you taped a bunch of, I can't use my fingers, but instead I have all these knives. I think I'm going to take that guy.
Does that mean you think Wolverine's up there when it comes to like superhero stuff?
Of dudes with equal size, right? If we're talking about physical combat, yeah, totally. Man, yeah,
and he can rejuvenate.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing. The man. It takes a lot to put the man down.
No, I love that. All right, let's talk basketball in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Frisky Whiskey. I think a lot of us may need it this weekend watching Auburn, Georgia. Frisky Whiskey is about 15 to 20 minutes away from the Auburn, Opelika County area. Right when you get into Georgia, you will see signs all over the place pointing you to Frisky Whiskey. They've got all the beer you could ask for. They've got all the wine, whiskey, vodka, tequila, whatever it may be. They've got it. They've also got a ton of mixers as well, so you don't have to worry about going anywhere else afterwards. It's right when you get into Georgia, and so they have different taxes and also their relationship with the distributors and all that is top-notch. So you get the best prices imaginable. Be sure to check out our friends at Frisky Whiskey. Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer. You've been to a few practices.
Yep.
So far, just general big picture takeaway, what you like about this team so far when you look at this Auburn basketball squad.
I really like the physical makeup of this team. I think this team has the potential to be more physical than the team we saw last year.
Wow.
I think Janai Broome and Yohan Traore, and then some of the things we've seen from some of the other guys on the team. I think it's that front court not going to be as talented as Jabari and Walker, obviously, but sure. I think they're going to be able to be more physical on the defensive end. I think they're a little stouter in that area. I think they're going to be more versatile, and they'll be able, like last season, you're going to play a ton of minutes with Jabari at the 4. You're going to play a ton of minutes with Walker at the 5. You kind of knew that locked in. This team's going to be a little bit more versatile. They're going to be able to mix and match more. Yeah. Also in the front court, Jalen Williams, Dylan Carwell. These are dudes that are just tough guys, hardworking dudes down in the paint. That'll help you out a ton. I think the backcourt, I think you can see, from what you can see and hear kind of from practices early on, you can see the difference in the fact that Wendell Green Jr., Zep Jasper, and Katie Johnson are back, right? They're not having to learn on the fly. They're really stepping up and being leaders. I'm really impressed with Wendell Green Jr. I was last season. His numbers were off the charts good. You watch this guy, and again, can't get into a ton of details of what I see at practice, but I can tell you this. The way he's carrying himself and the way teammates are talking about him, the way he's carrying himself here in the early – like he's carrying himself like a dude who's ready to be the alpha of this team. And that's great because I think he's that guy. He can be that guy. It reminds me a lot of when Jared Harper made that jump, in his tenure at Auburn, his second season, of course, obviously his third season, blowing up and going to the Final Four. I see a lot of that same vibe out of Wendell. I mean, this is a guy who's ready to lead this basketball team, and I think he's gonna do an excellent job at it.
Well, that's the position group that has the biggest questions, right? I think a lot of folks can say, okay, yeah, you lose Jabbar, you lose Walker, but there are clear answers to those spots, right? With the guys that they brought in. The biggest thing is like you didn't do a whole lot with the guards. You got Trey Donaldson coming in, but the guard production is going to be the three guys that we saw a ton last year, right?
And it depends on what you get out of Chance and where you play him. Like Chance Wester is going to be
he's a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, he's going to be a dude for you. And then he can play some 1, as we saw in Israel, be the primary ball handler.
Do you think that's a realistic thing that we see a lot of him playing because then where do the other guys go? Because Zepp can play the 2. KD,
I think you're going to see a lot. Right? I think you're going to see a lot of him playing the 2 this year. And yeah, Chance might be a guy that you see more at the 3, moving forward. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I also think Chance helps you out a lot because when you're on the floor, for Auburn last season they needed to have that Wendell Zepp backcourt, that 1-2 to have like multiple playmakers on the floor, right at the same time. This time I think you can be a little bit more versatile because I think Chance can do a lot of that secondary playmaking for you. And give you another option. But yeah, that backcourt, the interesting thing to me in the backcourt is going to be what they do at the 2. And it's going to come down to, do you start Zeb Jasper or do you start KD Johnson? There are pros and I don't even say there's a ton of cons. I think there's pros for each of those guys. Zeb, it reminds me a lot of when, and I said this last year, when Oklahoma City Thunder, when they used to bring James Harden off the bench but start Thabo Sefolosha, it was because of his defense. And it was because we're going to start the game with a dude who's going to take care of the ball. He's going to play defense. And then that second unit's going to have this dude who's an unreal scorer come in for us. It's interesting because I think Wendell's going to be your guy at the 1. Zepp, though, do you start with Zepp? Do you start with that defense and that ball control and that kind of consistency and then bring KD Johnson off the bench? I love the idea of KD off the bench. Yeah. Or do you flip it around and say, hey, we're going to hit you early with, and we know KD's a good defender in his own right, going to hit you with the more explosive version and hopefully a more consistent version of KD Johnson. I don't think you can go wrong either way. It's going to be really fun to see how Auburn kind of figures that what their best combo there is.
What is your confidence level in the guards scoring more efficiently and more consistently this year versus the second half of last year? I think the first half of last year we were all fine with, but the second half of last year.
Yeah, I think there's a good opportunity for them to score more consistently. I think what you got from Wendell last season is going to be what you get, and it's really, really good. I think he's one of the better point guards in college basketball. I think it's going to be the other 2 guys, right? It's going to be, does Zepp get more aggressive, especially when he's playing off ball with his jump shot? It looks like he's really been working on that. And then for KD, it's just you got to get consistency, right? In games where Auburn won last season, KD Johnson was Auburn's 3rd best player behind Jabari and Walker. That statistically he was just there. In losses, it was really rough, and he had that hand. He told us last week he kind of re-injured his hand in the Georgia game last year, something he had dealt with in the past. His shot was completely different from deep after that. Mm-hmm. That was a big change. If you get him more consistent, you avoid injury there. I mean, go back to the first part of the SEC schedule last season. KD Johnson was nearly a 40% 3-point shooter. He was killing it, especially from the corner. You got to get that guy out there a little bit more consistently. So another year of experience, another year of training, another year of just knowing what you're doing with those guys. I think there's a really good chance that you see that backcourt become more efficient this season, and which is only going to help Auburn.
KD's dropped 20 pounds or whatever, which is
19 pounds.
19 pounds. So much of his game though is attacking the basket.
Right.
Is that a concern at all, or is he just so much?
No, he's quicker. He's quicker, more explosive.
Just, playing that physical mindset, and when you do that, you get beat up a little bit. Is that a concern at all that he lost some of that weight, or is it all? Do you think everything's positive there?
He feels a lot more comfortable. He says playing at this weight. He looks quicker. He's more explosive. I think seeing him kind of run and jump and do some of these things and moving around, it looks a lot better with him, and that's his game. And he said it's I've never been. During COVID, he put on that kind of weight, and his first couple of years of college ball, he wasn't really playing at the weight he was comfortable with. He really worked hard this offseason to get back to his fighting weight. Now he's 6'1", 180, $185, something like that, around, or 189, I think is where he's technically at. And that's That's like quick attack, lightning fast combo guard kind of stuff. I think it's just going to give him a ton more confidence.
Ferg, one more time, how can people find you, hear you, read you, all that stuff?
AuburnObserver.com. $60 a month or $60 a year. Get all the newsletters, all the podcasts sent to you. And then follow me on Twitter at jfergusonau.
Yep, worth every penny. AuburnObserver.com. We'll be back Sunday morning for a little morning after. I will be doing that show live from a hotel room in Foxborough, Massachusetts, and then walking over to the Patriots game after that. So be sure to tune in. We will be back on Sunday. This has been Locked On Auburn.